Okay, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Hope you are well. And we're back. We're back to our, inshallah, more regular streams once a week or once every 2 weeks. What I'll be doing is I'm back from my travels. For those of you who know why there was quite a big absence between the last stream and the ones before that. So the previous Caravan of Contemplation episode was number 55, and that was sort of over a month ago. We're on number 56 now. Inshallah, I'll try to keep it just as it was. So I'll just be presenting some piece of contemplation, as always, and maybe for 15-20 minutes. And then anybody who wants to come on and present something can come on as per usual. So let's see who we have in the chat. I already saw you, Surah. Hope you're well. Adriana, as always, assalamu alaikum to you. And yeah, I've missed doing these as well. And we have here Perhanin Tuka. Hope you're well. Assalamu alaikum Tahseen Khan. And I'm seeing some new names now. Ted Blurry, don't know how to say, and old friend Sam from the UK. Okay, so what am I going to be talking about today? I'm going to be speaking about hadith, basically, two uses of the word hadith in the Qur'an. I'm pretty critical of the way that sometimes in the Qur'anist community they use the word, the appearance of the word hadith to sort of say not to follow that, the narrated hadith collections, that corpus. It's just an accident of history that it was called hadith, right? The hadith in Bukhari, Muslim, and the early collections, some of them didn't even call them hadiths. They could have been called akhbar. Okay, and then if they had been called akhbar, would the whole argument go out the window? The Quran, when it talks about condemning hadith, it's obviously not talking about hadiths that would be written and narrated long after the revelation. It's not talking about that. Right? It's talking about something else. And of course, yes, it does often refer to itself as the hadith, as a hadith. So, leave me and whoever rejects this hadith, talking about the Quran. But this is just one hadith, okay? And there are other types of hadith, etc. But, the fact that these narrations were called the hadith is more of a accident of history, sort of. They could have been called anba, okay? They could have been called akhbar, and they were called these various things, all right? They could have been called I don't know, other things like this. So riwayat, they were called riwayat, right? They are called riwayat. So just because they're being called hadith doesn't mean we're going to muster up all of the verses in the Quran which say hadith, right? Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Adriana. They were called also biography, siras. All of these were called. But I just want to look at. I'm going to be focusing on two incidents where the word comes. And these both only happen once in the Quran. So let me get to here. Okay, so you have in one verse in the Quran is mentioned Lahw al-Hadith, and in another verse it talks about Ahsan al-Hadith. Okay, so these are two terms, both appearing only once in the Quran, right? And they seem to be on opposite ends, but let's look at it. Okay, so the Quran uses the word hadith in two key phrases, both used only once, and they seem to be on opposite ends of the spectrum. So you've got Lahw al-Hadith and Ahsan al-Hadith. Okay, there's Ahsan al-Hadith, which Ahsan means the best or the most beautiful hadith or discourse. It comes from the same word as al-Muhsinin, the doers of good or the beauty makers. Okay, Husn is about beauty. The word husn and hasan, it's about beauty. And generally it was, when we talked about physically a person, it was more related to the eyes, whereas the word jameel, for example, that also means beautiful, but that's more related to the nose. It's sort of like why it comes that way. The jamal is a camel, right? And the jamal to the Arab was jameel. One of the things that was jameel about it was the nose. For some reason, the Arabs used to think that the camel had a very nice nose. Okay, so the first one which I'm sure is known to many of you, this is the one where it talks about the Quran itself. So this is in Surah Al-Zumar, and it says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم الله نزل أحسن الحديث. God has sent down the best hadith, the best discourse. أحسن الحديث, the most beautiful discourse. كتابا متشابها, a book consimilar. I like this translation of متشابه, consimilar. So as you know, in its often repeated part. كتابا متشابها مثاني, مثاني, you know, often repeated. Then it says تقشعر منه جلود الذين يخشون ربهم. That the skins of those who fear or have khashya of their Lord tremble because of it, because of this Ahsan al-Hadith. Let me just turn off my phone. And thereafter, ثم their skins, these same julud, ثم تلين جلودهم وقلوبهم إلى ذكر الله. Then their skins and their hearts become soft for the remembrance of Allah. Okay, تلين جلودهم وقلوبهم إلى ذكر الله. So it's very interesting. It's you know, in the beginning it talks about how the skins shiver. Okay, and the skins are sort of the outward. Okay, and then it goes inwards, right? ثم تلين جلودهم. Those same skins become soft, and the hearts inside become. So now it's going into internally. Okay, إلى ذكر الله. Okay. And then it says, ذَلِكَ هُدَى اللَّهِ, that is the guidance of Allah, يَهْدِي بِهِ مَنْ يَشَاءُ. He guides with it whoever He wills or whoever wills. Sometimes you can translate it that way. Whoever wants this guidance, they can have it. وَمَنْ يُضْلِلِ اللَّهُ فَمَا لَهُ مِنْ هَادٍ. And he whom God lets go astray or leads astray, he has no guide. Okay? So that's where Ahsan al-Hadith comes in. And this guidance, this huda of Allah is of course towards the paths of Allah, the subul, right? To the sirat al-mustaqim or to sabilillah. So the Quran talks a lot about sabilillah, the path of Allah. Okay? And also talks about paths, many in the plural. وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. Those who strive in us, we will certainly guide them towards our subul, our paths. Because there are many paths, you know, many minhaj. You know, God has sent different prophets, with different ways, but they're all within the broad path to God. Okay, and standing in opposition to this is Lahw al-Hadith. So this Ahsan al-Hadith and the guidance, which is mentioned here, okay, which will come from Ahsan al-Hadith. You also have something standing in opposition to that, Lahw al-Hadith, which is bought and propagated by some among mankind with the intention of misguiding others. And that's in the next verse, which is this verse, and it's in Surah Al-Luqman, and it says, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَشْتَرِي لَهْوَ الْحَدِيثِ. And there are some among people among mankind who would purchase distracting talk, you could say, distracting Lahw al-Hadith. We'll talk more about what that means, but I just left the translation, distracting talk. Okay? Lahw al-Hadith. Why? ليضل عن سبيل الله. To lead astray from the Sabilillah, from the path of Allah. Okay, so just as Ahsan al-Hadith, it talks about it being, that is the huda, ذَلِكَ هُدَى اللَّهِ يَهْدِي بِهِ مَنْ يَشَاءُ. That is the guidance of Allah, such is the guidance of Allah, whereby He guides whomever He wills. Here we have misguidance coming from those who use Lahw al-Hadith. Okay, ليضل عن سبيل الله بغير علم, without knowledge. بغير علم, without knowledge. And take it in mockery. ويتخذها هزوا. It takes it in mockery. It mocks the path of Allah, سبيل الله. Okay? And then it says at the end, أولئك لهم عذاب مهين. For them is such a عذاب مهين. Now, the interesting thing about this is that those mentioned here are not the creators or the inventors or the crafters of the Lahw al-Hadith. Instead, they are those who acquire it or purchase it. Doesn't mean they have to actually buy it, like they spend money to get it, but they acquire it. They through even their time and effort. In the Quran, Allah says, "Inna Allah ashtara min al-mu'minina anfusahum wa amwalahum." God has bought from the faithful their lives and their property. بأن لهم الجنة. In exchange for them will be Jannah. So there's that trade. Okay, some effort to get that there. So there are some who through effort they get this Lahw al-Hadith. And you can, if you want, think about the journeying that's praised of all of the the muhaddithin, that they traveled from Hind to Sindh, from they traveled north and south and went to Egypt, did all of these travels to collect hadith. Okay, to collect hadith, right? So they didn't invent them. Okay, a lot of people they put a lot of blame, for example, on Bukhari. All of the hadiths which are in Bukhari were there before him, and they're in early collections in Muwatta, in Imam Ahmad, and they're there. All he did was collect. Okay, all he used to collect. And the way he collected is, of course, important because of it has his footprint in it, because what he chose to keep in, what he chose to leave out, and what he chose to alter a little bit because some things he didn't like, all of that, and also how he arranged his book in terms of the chapters, the headings, how the people later on used that. But the point is here that in this verse is talking about من الناس من يشتري لهو الحديث. They are buying this لهو الحديث, they are getting it, they are acquiring it. ليضل عن سبيل الله بغير علم. That and with it they lead astray from the path of Allah without any knowledge, and furthermore they take the path of Allah as huzwan. Okay, they purchase it. They find this lahw al-hadith already formed by others. It's already there. It's already out there. Okay, they use this lahw al-hadith without knowledge, and they lead others astray from the path of God by it. And while doing so, they even mock the path of Allah. Okay, they make a mockery of it, or they actually literally mock it. They may call it simple. For example, they will say, it's simple. The path of Allah that you're talking about, it's simplistic. It's shallow. It's silly, right? What you telling us that you just have to basically, act like a human being, and that's enough to get you into Jannah? Yeah, that is what we're saying, right? But they will mock that. You say, no, you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to have this aqidah and this aqidah and this aqidah, and you have to, and they complicate it, right? They complicate it in such a way that then they mock and belittle the path of Allah, right? In that kind of way. And so they bring these, maybe bring absurd arguments against it, And then, what happens when they are confronted with the signs and the verses of Allah? The next verse tells us. So you have this verse, which says that again. Let me repeat it. وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَن يَشْتَرِي لَهْوَ الْحَدِيثِ. And among mankind are those who purchase لَهْوَ الْحَدِيث or acquire لَهْوَ الْحَدِيث لِيُضِلَّ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ, to take people away from سبيل الله بغير علم, without knowledge, وَيَتَّخِذُهَا هُزُوًا. And even using that لَهْوَ الْحَدِيث, they mock the path of Allah. They mock the path of Allah. أُولَٰئِكَ لَهُمْ عَذَابٌ مُهِينٌ. And then if they're confronted with the signs of Allah, وَإِذَا تُتْلَى عَلَيْهِ آيَاتُنَا, okay, when our verses are recited to him and say, no, look, this is what Allah is saying. These are the verses of Allah. Okay, leave lahw al-hadith for a minute, okay, and look at the verses of Allah. What does he do? وَلَّا مُسْتَكْبِرًا. He turns his back in pride, in arrogance. كَأَنْ لَمْ يَسْمَعْهَا. As though he didn't even hear these verses, as if he didn't hear them, or as if he's never heard them. And you find that often, right? I find that often. Somebody is so enamored with lahw al-hadith, okay, but then you recite to them the verses of Allah, they turn away arrogantly from it. They know better. They have the aqidah of so and so, the fiqh books of so and so, the madhab of this. That's where they feel arrogant because of all of this lahw al-hadith that they have. Okay, but the signs of Allah, because of that, because of the arrogance within that, they turn away from the signs of Allah. They look down upon it, and they will mock it, as we said. كأن لم يسمعها, and as if he's never even heard it. Doesn't really hear. And in that, remember all of the verses which talk about those who do not hear, right? Those who do not hear. فَتَرَاهُمْ يَنْظُرُونَ إِلَيْكَ هُمْ لَا يُبْصِرُونَ, and they look at you, but they don't see. Okay? أَفَأَنْتَ تُسْمِعُ الصُّمَّ, are you going to make the deaf hear? Can you make them hear? You can't make them hear. Right? And remember again all of the verses which say, which talk to the human being and say, we've given him the hearing, sight, and heart faculty. قَلِيلًا مَا تَشْكُرُونَ, how little you are grateful, how little shukr you do, which means how little you use them. You're not actually using your hearing, your sight, your thing. And hearing is it's always mentioned first because it's through the hearing that guidance comes about. Even though most people would look at the blessing of sight as a superior blessing, getting able to see what's around you. Okay, but with hearing is how the message of God comes mostly. Okay, and it says كأن في أذنيه وقرة, as if in his ears there's wax. Waqra is like wax. Here in the translation is like heaviness, like he's got heaviness in his ear, like he can't really hear. It's as if he can't hear. كأن لم يسمعها كأن في أذنه وقرة. And this is being emphasized. This person is just not hearing. Like there's a barrier in his ears. And the barrier in his ears, of course, is all of the Lahw al-Hadith that he's already got between his two ears, so that nothing will get in. Okay, so then the verse says, فَبَشِّرْهُ بِعَذَابٍ عَلِيمٍ. This person who can't even hear, doesn't have the human faculty to be able to hear and listen. Okay, بَشِّرْهُ بِعَذَابٍ عَلِيمٍ. Okay, the Jannah is for a human being. Okay, Jannah is for a human being, right? The hellfire is for sharrul bariyah, as the Quran says, the worst of creation. The human being was not meant to be the worst of creation. It's not meant to be less than what he is, which is a creature who can hear, listen, and think. If you can't do that, you are subhuman, and you do not belong in Jannah. We have gone on a bit too long there. So a quick, if not necessarily good example, I just thought of this while I was writing this, is a situation. There's a famous clip, some of you will know who we're talking about here, of a traditional famous da'i arguing about hijab, the traditional hijab, and putting forward a very vulgar argument, crude argument, which is a mockery. Basically saying, well, if you say this according to the Quran, right? I'm not going to say the full argument, but he's basically saying, if you say this, what we say from the Quran, if it's true, then old women can go around bare-breasted. So that was his argument. That is how he's trying to argue against the verses of Allah, and it's an argument from ulu, from this position of arrogance and haughtiness. Oh, really? You say this? Your argument is that simplistic from the Quran? Okay, then I'll make it. I'll make a mockery out of it for you. Okay, from your argument, you're saying that older women can go around bare-breasted, which is of course nonsense. But it just shows you that sort of mentality. It is worth also noting other verses that relate to this verse, this idea of Lahw al-Hadith and Ahsan al-Hadith. Not in terms of, it's not repeated, like I said, the word Lahw al-Hadith, that phrase doesn't come again in the Quran, but what is happening here, the same situation, and how they divert from the sabilillah, that can be followed up. If you look up in the Quran, all of incidents where God is talking about those who lead others astray from sabilillah, you can find that it's related to this Lahw al-Hadith. Okay, so one set of verses that mirrors this very well is here. I think it is Surah al-Hajj. And it says, it starts almost exactly the same. وَمِنَ النَّاسِ, and among mankind, مَنْ يُجَادِلُ فِي اللَّهِ, the one who argues about God, argues about the things of God, what God has said in the Quran, what the signs of God. How does he sign? بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ. How does he argue? Sorry. بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ وَلَا هُدًى وَلَا كِتَابٍ مُنِيرٍ. Okay, how does he argue then? If he's not arguing with knowledge, he's not arguing with huda, with guidance, he's not arguing with a kitab, enlightening kitab, how is he arguing? He's arguing with Lahw al-Hadith, the same phrase, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يُجَادِلُ فِي اللَّهِ بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ وَلَا هُدًى وَلَا كِتَابٌ مُنِيرٌ, is what we're talking about. Let's come back to that verse again. وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَشْتَرِي لَهْوَ الْحَدِيثِ لِيُضِلَّ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. Okay, and of course he's going to argue with it. He's going to take this Lahw al-Hadith, and that's what he's going to be using to argue. Okay. بغير علم ولا هدى ولا كتاب منير. And here comes the arrogance again. Just like the other verse talked about how the person, if you recite to him the signs of Allah, he turns away in arrogance. It's mentioned here again. ثاني عطفه ليضل عن سبيل الله. Again, see, to lead astray from the path of Allah, twisting his neck or turning his side in arrogance to mislead people from the way of Allah, from sabilillah. For him in the world it is disgrace. Okay. له في الدنيا خزي. And you find that, okay, you find that the people who are like this, that ultimately around him, people who are more awake, they will look down upon these people, so backwards, so silly, right? لهم في الدنيا خزي. In the dunya, it's a disgrace. They're a disgrace to humanity. Okay. ونذيقه يوم القيامة عذاب الحريق. On the day of judgment, we will make him taste of the burning punishment, or the burning fire. And it will be said to him, the next verse, very interesting, ذَلِكَ بِمَا قَدَّمَتْ يَدَاكَ. Okay, that is by what your own hands, your own effort has put forward. وَأَنَّ اللَّهَ لَيْسَ بِظَلَّامٍ لِلْعَبِيدِ. And God is never unjust to his servants. God is never never unjust to his servant. I don't know why I say because Allah is not Allah is not ever unjust to his servants. And of course, this means, when he's being punished, it's not that he's being punished and he's thinking that God is being unjust to him. Okay, and he's been told, no, God is not being unjust to you. He knows. Okay, then that's the interesting thing about these verses, which talk on the day of judgment about God speaking to these people who are being punished and telling them that God is not being unjust. Okay, it's not really telling them that God is not being unjust there, because on the day of judgment, everybody will know that God is not being unjust. Those in hellfire, they know that God is not being unjust. It is, in fact, that it is saying that God was innocent of the injustice you ascribe to him. Okay, that's why it says here, ذَلِكَ. This punishment you're getting, ذَلِكَ. Okay, it's because Allah was not unjust. Yet you told people that God was unjust. That way you took the Lahw al-Hadith and you took other things and you spread it out that God was unjust. And then people thought of God as unjust because of you. Okay, that was your lie, your iftira on Allah. Right? ذَلِكَ بِمَا قَدَّمَتْ يَدَاكَ. That is because what your own hands have put forward, and because what you did, putting forward, is wrong. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَيْسَ بِظَلَّامٍ الْعَبِيدِ. God is not unjust to his servants. Okay, so what is exactly Lahw al-Hadith? I mean, you might have gotten the gist of it by now. In short, it's any discourse or idea that is propagated to stand and bar from the path of Allah, from the path of Allah, and from Ahsan al-Hadith, which is the Qur'an, anything which will stand against that or bar people from it. And there are many examples of that in the narrated Hadith corpus, that's true, but certainly not all of them are Lahw al-Hadith. Not everything in the Hadith corpus is Lahw al-Hadith. There's a lot which is, but not everything is. There are many Hadith which mirror the Qur'an very well. In the end, what matters is the content. The content. It doesn't matter that it's being called Hadith now by us. Hadith in Bukhari and Muslim, it doesn't matter that they're being called that. So Lahw al-Hadith is anything that takes you away or preoccupies you. Yulhika. Where Lahw al-Hadith, the same thing that we're talking about, this verb, yulhika, which is something which sort of occupies it, takes you away, distracts you. It's like somebody coming to you and deliberately distracting you from what you're supposed to be doing. Okay, yulhika, and bars you from contemplating the Qur'an. Okay, it is the things which are locks on the heart that prevent Tadaburat, prevents you from pondering the Qur'an. So among it is everything that you have ever been told, and when you remember it, it prevents you from believing what the Qur'an says and pondering it. Right? So everything where when you read the Qur'an and it says X, you think, but the Hadith says Y, the Sheikhs say Y, the sects say Y. Now all of this is Lahw al-Hadith. Right? You read the Qur'an, it's clearly saying something, but then the Hadith, the Sheikh, the sects, they say Y, and that all those sayings, all that Hadith, all that Lahw al-Hadith is preventing you from accepting X, which the Qur'an says. Now this is Lahw al-Hadith. It's Lahw al-Hadith. Again, it's been propagated by those by those who are mentioned in that verse before. They acquire this Lahw al-Hadith and they misguide people without any knowledge. Okay, that's about it. That's the end of this. There's a lot more, of course, that could be said about Lahw al-Hadith and other things in the appearance of the word hadith even by itself in the Quran. But that was my brief contemplation that I wanted to present to you. All right, let me have a look at the chat, see what people are saying, and remind if anybody would like to come on, feel free to come on. The link, as always, is pinned at the top of the chat. So, perfect dawah. Assalamu alaikum. You're here as well. You can see that before. Is an interesting username. Don't know what language that is. Assalamu alaikum to you. Yeah, this is a nice translation. A consistent book with no contradictions or errors. A confirmation of the previous revelation. So this is from a different verse in the Quran. Yeah. So yeah, the Quran. One of the things that people miss about the Quran, they think the Quran is supposed to be is a perfect book of guidance. It's not a perfect book of guidance. If God had wanted to make a perfect book of guidance, it wouldn't have been like the Quran. The Quran fits into the purpose of this world. The Quran fits in, it has the guidance, but in the Quran are the things that will also misguide people, right? لا يزيد الظالمين إلا خسارة, the Quran says. It will increase the unjust in their injustice, okay, and it will increase the disease of the hearts of those in whose heart there is a disease. It has a function. The Quran has that part of its function, part of the way it is it fits into the purpose of this world. The purpose of this world is al-ibtila wal-farz wal-tamyiz, that God is going to test and sift people. So the Quran is part of that, right? You can recognize, which is why, it's one of the signs of the Quran, isn't it, that there is no book that's more loved by those who love it, nor more hated by those who hate it. I think I've mentioned this before, that it's very difficult for somebody who spends a long time with the Quran to be on the fence with it. Okay, just sit there, sort of like, I don't know, I like it or don't like it. No, it will push you. It will push you to one end of the extremes. Okay, you will either be pushed towards more righteousness and goodness, or by your aversion to it, you'll be on the other side. Okay, there's a nice pithy statement in Martin Ling's book, his Sirah, where he says that just as the revelation, that when the Prophet was there among the people in Mecca and the Quran was there, and people might seem at odd, everybody was sort of beforehand, everybody was similar, right? Most people not much better than the other, nor much worse than the other, right? And he says it's understandable that the Quran would make the good people excel themselves, but those people who didn't seem like they were altogether bad, how is it that they became even worse because of the Quran and the message of the Prophet? They ended up, it's by their reactions. Okay, the force of goodness in the Prophet and in the Quran, it will pull out more goodness, pull out the goodness in those who are good, just as it will measure out the full extent of the evil of those in whose heart there is evil. It will measure it out by their resistance to it. I don't know if I've made that clear. Making a God by themselves. Sammy is a good example of this. Yeah. Eternity. Thank you. Okay, I hope you're doing well. I missed these caravan sessions. Yes, thank you. All right, okay. Let me see. I have perfect dawah. Assalamu alaikum. I'll be backstage. Let me bring you on. Let me first put it like this.
Yeah, assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, brother. Thank you for this opportunity. We were missing you, brother. It was a long time ago. That's very good to have you back, inshallah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And yourself, how have you been?
Yeah, alhamdulillah, I have had. Yeah, I was going to say that I'm like several years now doing discussion about trying to do dawah as well, and of course on my channel also I have a lot of discussions about these fabricated hadiths that you were now mentioning, and yeah, a lot of attack from these people who just blindly, as you mentioned it in Quran very well, that they fool these people like Bukhari and Muslim. They with this, I know, of course, myself as well as you said, I don't reject all of their hadiths, but there are many fabricated hadiths in their books, and many people they just blindly follow them. Okay,
Yeah, I
and
want
I
to make
have
something just to
yes,
be clear. Okay, so when I say what I was mentioning here about Lahw al-Hadith, it doesn't just include, yes, among hadiths, then the hadith corpus, there is definitely a lot of Lahw al-Hadith.
yes,
But even things which I said now, things which I said now for the first time, new views which come out now, any that sort of stuff can still be considered Lahw al-Hadith. Okay,
yeah,
it's in general anything, like I said, which bars you from the contemplation of the Quran and from Tadabbur, um, and from Sabilillah, right? So
yeah,
Lahul Hadith, it doesn't have to be just the narrations, the hadiths. It can be just, it can be it can be a book that's written 200 years ago, 300 years ago, which has become now what everybody needs to follow. Like, for example, in Saudi Arabia, you have Kitab al-Tawheed of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, right?
yeah,
And you have the Usul al-Arba'a, and you have all of these things, the Aqidah Wasatiyya of Ibn Taymiyyah, all of these things, and they can be considered Lahu al-Hadith, right?
yes, exactly.
So it's not just the narrations with a sanad and isnad where you can start to criticize all the matan and the chain. That's it's not only those which are Lahu al-Hadith. Okay,
Yeah,
there's even, I would say, there's even among um, um, even within sort of Qur'anist circles, there can be Lahw al-Hadith as well.
yeah,
Okay,
I
even
understand.
within Qur'anist circles, where people are now have certain views. Okay, that can also be Lahw al-Hadith,
Yeah, for example,
right?
I can tell you that I have been talking to some of them about Hajj. Yeah, they said we don't need to go to Hajj even. There are things that
Mm,
they just even reject. That's
mm,
also exactly Lahwul Hadith, of course.
mm.
For example, because I tell them usually that if we don't need, Hadith, if just Quran in Quran doesn't mention what we have to wear when we go to Hajj, what kind of practice we have to perform there, like stoning shaitan is not there.
Well, it mentions some of the practices.
Yes,
Right?
some, yes, I know, but
Mentions
not
some of the
all.
practices.
But
Yeah.
not all.
So here's the question. Here's the question.
Yeah,
If you do just the practices mentioned in the Quran, is that enough?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, my
Yeah,
main question is about
I would
the dress of ihram.
say
What shall
it's
I
enough.
wear?
Why not?
Yeah, shall I wear?
Well,
You know,
if the Quran doesn't say what to wear, then that
mhm,
doesn't mean that there is something you have to wear, right?
mhm,
I mean, yes, I mean, I believe, for example, that because it's a practice, okay? It's a because even the Quran talks about ثم أفيضوا من حيث أفاض الناس, when talking about Hajj. Okay, then
yeah,
go from the same place that other people are going. So that there's a tradition that's known. And Hajj is, of course, something which was done, a long time, generation upon generation, etc. Um, but there is no need. I mean, if there's no need to, the Quran says, وعلى الناس حج البيت من استطاع إليه سبيلا, right? To do, and upon mankind is to do a pilgrimage to the house, whoever
mhm,
can. Okay,
yes,
Muhammad Shahrur made an interesting observation. So he said there's the verse which talks about الحج أشهر معلومات. Says Hajj is أشهر معلومات. فمن فرض فيهن الحج. So whoever makes fard upon himself in them the Hajj. So he says that Hajj, and I agree with this. It's Quranically very sound, right? The
yeah,
Hajj is even a Umrah you do during the sacred months, the months of Hajj. If you do it at that time, that's also a Hajj. that counts as Hajj.
Yeah.
Okay, and then there's Yawm al-Hajj al-Akbar. That's different. So right now, most people think that Yawm al-Hajj al-Akbar, that is Hajj, and any other time it's not Hajj. So he's showing no, and that makes more sense. If the Quran was going to be a global thing, you can't have, and you know, in the best case scenario, the whole planet, everybody is Muslim, they're not all going to be able to do Hajj on that one. Like you need to have like should be able to visit the Kaaba, the Bayt, any time in that, and that will be a Hajj. So it's, I mean, it's an interesting thing to think about.
Inshallah. Yeah,
Yeah,
just
but in terms of I mean, again, it's one of those questions where people say, okay, if it's not in the Quran, what should I do? Do. I mean, you're not going to go naked, are you? So just wear something and go.
yeah.
The point is to do the Hajj, right? وعلى الناس ولله على الناس حج البيت. Right? Just do it. Go to the house. Do a pilgrimage to the house. You don't need, you know, that's what's fard, right? To just do the pilgrimage. It's the same issue with Salah that I find now that's plaguing a lot of the sort of like the Quranic centric thing. They try to find a specific way of doing Salah in the Quran, and there isn't. Okay, does that mean you have to follow the traditional way of doing Salah? No, you don't have to follow the traditional way of doing Salah. But it's praised. Allah talks about لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. In the Messenger of Allah, there is a good uswa. For what? لمن ذكر Allah, to whoever wants to remember Allah. And both the Hajj and the Salah, these are for dhikr, right? These are for dhikr of Allah. And there is also an argument that the Hajj is really mostly just for the Arab, right? You could make that argument, or at least for the descendants of Ibrahim. And I think it's a weak argument, but that could be said, okay? Because the Quran talks about how, in the context of Hajj, it talks about how to every people we have given them a sort of a Hajj ritual, okay? So you know other people have their own, okay? لكل جعلنا منسكا, to all people we have given these sort of rites or rituals so that they can remember God, right? So there is that. I mean, I haven't thought about it deeply, but that's something to look into for whoever wants.
Yeah. Just yeah, of course. I was saying about this. You know, the Islamophobes, they use a lot of these fabricated hadiths to you know, attack Islam, unfortunately. And I have been trying to yes, to somehow clear this. Of course, they don't like. For example, tonight I was talking to Haris Sultan. He was saying that I'm not interested in your Islam, you know, and you are trying to, you know, to make Islam look good. And it is very, very sad that, of course, I understand that if they believe that the Islam that somebody like me or you, sorry, present, then they get out of their job, because their job is now to demonize Islam. You know, they get, you know, like they get support, they get, you know, money from the YouTube and such things. That's why they are not going to accept that Islam is not what ISIS and Taliban and these, you know, fabricated hadiths say. So they are not going to listen to people like me. That's why they reject me. They don't want to talk to me, because they say you, you know, you make Islam look good. Unfortunately, you know, and of course these extremists have been also blocking me, all of them. And last week, one of them, he's 1.5 year Muslim. Okay, uh, I want to say maybe his channel, YouTube channel, but 1.5 year he's a Muslim, and he came to a channel and said that this guy is not a Muslim. You know, he takfir me. Can you imagine? That already he
Yeah,
did fatwa that I'm not a Muslim just because I'm
yeah, that
against his.
happens.
Yeah,
That happens to a lot of new converts. It happens
yeah,
quite a
yeah,
lot. You know, if they get into that crowd, that's what they do.
Of course, it's
unfortunately.
not just them, it's not just them. For example, I think maybe he get this from his followers on his YouTube channel who are, born Muslim. Okay, they are not converted Muslim. They say
Yeah.
because once I went on his channel, everybody was, oh, he's not a Muslim, and then they said that he's not a Muslim. He's,
Who is this, by the way?
is this EA Dawa, his name is Brother Khalil, yeah, and
EA Dawa.
yeah, EA Dawa.
Heard of it. I mean, I
No, yeah,
didn't expect it on, but
they have this, they have almost every day they have live stream, and he's from USA, and yes, they have like 7, 8, even sometimes 16 hours, and they invite non-Muslim to challenge them. And I try always to tell them that, excuse me, first you have to learn your own religion before you invite people to your religion. I would like to know, as a non-Muslim, I would like to know which Islam you are going to, invite me to. Islam that is believing in stoning adulterers, killing apostate, and so on. So first, you have to make clear what kind of Islam you believe in. That's why I'm trying to talk to them, but they say that, oh, you are not Muslim, so we are not going to talk to you. They try to to block me. All of them, they have blocked me, like EF Dawa, Sapien Institute.
well,
Unfortunately.
with regard to people, what you mentioned first, I think, what did you mention? The ex-Muslim, right? What's his name?
Yeah,
Harry Sultan, right?
Yeah, Harith Sultan.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, for people who want to be critical of Islam, right?
Yeah,
And they will say, right, that they're not interested in your Islam, and
yeah,
in many ways that's the right approach, because if you're going to be dealing with Islam as a as a force in the world, okay, then you have to be aiming at the majority. You have to be aiming at the majority. That's what you have to be interested in. You have to be interested in understanding or trying to do your activism against or towards the dominant Islam. And you're not going to be, you're not going to want to be interested in every single fringe um, or idea or this or that. So that's with regards to your activism. Yeah, with the activism, yes, you shouldn't be interested in the Islam of one person or this person or the minor groups. In terms of activism, you should be directed towards the majority, and because that's what is active in the world. But in terms of your own perceptions, right? Yeah, you're right. I mean, he shouldn't be saying I'm not interested in your Islam, though of course he shouldn't be interested in your Islam. What he should be interested in is his own Islam, his own investigation, his own thing. And people like you and others could help him with that investigation, with that journey of getting his own Islam, right? So just as he says, I'm not interested in your Islam, you'd say to him, okay, but you should look for your own Islam yourself then. Okay, you're not
no,
interested in mine,
he
you're not
just wants.
interested in the majority, then
Yeah.
find your own. Do you
He
have your
just want
own?
no. He just want to destroy Islam. He was just saying that in 3 generation Islam is gone. you know, I don't know from where he get this. Interesting is that these people they just, as I said, for example, I'm supporting an organization, okay, that is fighting Iranian regime, okay, and he has a friend called Armin Navabi, okay. This Armin Navabi is also Iranian, and he has a channel called Jihad, sorry, Secular Jihadist. He's also called himself a former Muslim, yeah, ex-Muslim. And this Armin Nabavi has told him that my organization is involved in some, violence activities. All right. So this guy, Haris Sultan, he said that I'm not going to talk to you because you are supporting an organization which is involved in violence. Okay. So I tonight I talked to him. I could enter his stream, and I told him that you are not a good judge because a good judge has to hear from both sides, the accuser and the accused, okay, both of them. And he said, no, I don't know you. I'm not going to spend time and learn about the organization. Whatever Armin Navabi says, I believe in it. I said, this is the way you do about Islam as well. You just see one side, and then you decide from that side that you like to hear. You decide that, okay, Prophet Muhammad, yes, he had sex with the 9-year-old child, or he stoned people to death, and so on. Yeah, you don't want to hear anything else. Let me explain. You have to listen to me as well. That what is my organization? Why you just no? I have to ask Armin. If he tell me that
well, look, I mean, I don't want to spend too much time talking about, because I know that there's that mentality, and you could spend a lot of time just speaking about their reaction to this and that. What can you do? I mean, I'm personally not involved in trying to and to be honest, somebody doesn't want to speak to me or to you or to somebody. They don't want to speak. They don't want to speak. I mean, you can't do anything. There's no point. I want you to speak with them. You can find plenty of people who will listen, who have your own mindset. So I would advise just focusing on people like that, rather than to think. So here we have this comment from a dot. Allah acknowledges that the people of the book made the clerics like gods, has not approached the hadith till present day. Not only some Muslims have done the same. Yes, and they have, exactly. I mean, it's there is, for example, the hadith, okay, which has Quranic backing of the Prophet, which says you will follow the way of those before you, right? You will follow the way of those before you, the Jews and the Christians, basically. Step by step, right? Span by span, step by step, such that if they entered the hole of a lizard, you would do so too, right? And so we have pretty much done, and the way to look at this is Quranically, just look at everything which the Quran talks about the Jews and the Christians. You'll find that we have something similar. You'll find that we have something parallel. And what the Quran criticizes al-Kitab for, you'll find that we're falling into the same sort of thing, right? Into the same sort of thing. And Adriana said here, yes, I mean, I completely agree. No offense, but I don't need them, because I feel like I have been searching for Allah for too long to pay attention about what humans do. I want to be as Allah and go to heaven to see Him. Yeah, and that's a very valid thing. I mean, I'm, for example, I completely the whole Quran alone, without anything else, that is absolutely fine, and it works. I mean, people need to. There's something which people don't understand when with me, at least. Okay, so they because I do accept some of the history and some of the hadiths. I see you should accept your mind, but at the same time, I completely defend the position that you can reject everything, every single narration, all the history, the mass practices, everything. And with the Quran alone by itself, you can still reach the highest level of spirituality and Jannah. You don't need a single thing else, nothing. The Quran, you have to give enough credit to the Quran to be able to do that, right? Allah says, "Inna hadha al-Quran yahdi lillati hiya aqwam." This Quran guides to that which is most upright. You don't need to pay attention to a single narration. You can reject it all, and it's still fine. Okay, give the Quran that due. Give Allah that due.
Yeah, I just would like also to add that there is a Christian from South Africa. Before he calls to my channel, and he had a lot of prejudice against Islam, and he believed that Islam is from devil and so on. But now, Alhamdulillah, he's very, very good brother. And he asked me what will happen to me if I die according to Islam. I said, as long as you are a good human, you are safe. Okay. And of course, some extremist Muslim might not agree with me, but I also believe as long as you are a good person and you do not harm people, you do good, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, enter my Jannah for what you used to do. So all that matter is what you do here in this world, for me. And yes, I would like to say as well that I need support from my fellow Muslims to somehow try to change these people who like these extremists who spread false information about Islam, like bad behavior, like as I said, killing apostate and stoning adulterers and all these things. So please, I have my live stream every Saturday. Those who would like to help, they can join and listen, and if they can join the stream and support me in this way, that we can somehow, inshallah, change them, because I'm almost somehow alone, and they block me from everywhere. And some of them, for example, brother Khalil, is so interesting that some of them, they have so little knowledge, they don't know even that for example, stoning adultery is in Quran or it's just a hadith, but yet they support this barbaric act. And there was a guy who was telling me that, oh, you are a munafiq, and so I invited him to my channel, and then he called in, and I asked him about the verse of stoning adultery. He said, I don't have it in my mind, but I will look for it. I will find it for you. Then I was telling him that you even don't know that there is no such a verse in Quran, and you trying to tell me that I'm munafiq because I reject such a barbaric act. Or somebody, and there is also a converted Muslim. He also have a YouTube channel. He's also American, and he was also defending stoning adulterers. Yeah, yet he on his show he was saying, "Can someone confirm if it is in Quran or it is Hadith?" He even didn't know, and he was saying that this is the Islamic law, and then yes, if we caught somebody doing this in the public, then I will do it myself. And I was trying to tell him that you even don't know that if this is in Quran or not, that then you put it on Islam, you attach it to Islam. This is wrong of you. Of course, he was very angry with me and so on.
Yeah, well, this happens a lot. I've got somebody else I want to bring on.
All right, okay, brother. Thank you very much. And
no problem.
Yes, please. I just once again, I would like also you, brother Khalil, join me in my brother Khalid Saleh. Join my live stream, and anybody else, I would be very glad. I appreciate it very much. Thank you, my
it's
brother.
on Saturdays, right?
Yes, every Saturdays. Yeah, perfect dawah. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, brother. Assalamu alaikum.
No problem. Okay, so we have Rashid or Rashid. I keep on forgetting which is because where it's written. But before I bring you on, I just want to mention to others that I'm going to have a guest on. Not sure if it's next week or the week after. But a non-Muslim lady, I think she's a college student, young lady. She's actually doing a reading of the Quran for the first time, and I came across her when she put a post on Reddit regarding her thoughts on the first surah of the Quran, and since then she's added some of her thoughts on Al-Baqarah, and as she's reading through it, and she's made a blog for her Islam learning just to record it. And she had some very nice insights and some excellent Tadaburat. So I invited her. I said, "Would you like to come on to this stream?" And she said, "Yes, she'd love to." So I'm going to have her on. Let me put it in the chat, so you guys can have a look at it. She made a very nice observation about Surah Al-Fatiha, which I've never heard of before, and it's because she studied the beginning of a lot of these epic poems from the past, these epic play sort of poems. Iliad, or I don't know specifics, but because I've never read them. But in the beginning, there's always this prayer for the divine muse to inspire them, and then the rest of the poem, the rest of the thing is sort of the muse taking over, right? And she made a parallel of the Surah Al-Fatiha feels a bit like that it's this prayer of guidance, and then the rest of the Quran is sort of God speaking, and answering, which is true. I mean, Fatiha, by the way, when you critically look at it, it was the first surah to be revealed. That Surah Al-Fatiha was revealed first. The Prophet used to recite it, and sort of the Quran is a response to that plea in Surah Al-Fatiha for guidance, right? The rest of the Quran is a response for that. Okay, so I've put in the link in the chat. Let me actually link our blog as well. It's called Learning Islam, like I said, and yeah, very interesting. So I thought it would be good to have her on, because we haven't had many women come on as well. That's another positive about that. So there it is. Let me put it again. All right. Okay. Rashid, right? And bring you on. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
How are you? How have you been?
Alhamdulillah, very fine. How about you?
Excellent. Before we go on, let me just double check on some of these, because I end up missing a lot of these chats. After that says, if a rigorous reanalyzation of hadith were to occur in our times, would it not make sense that hadith Qudsi would override all hadiths anyway? Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, the funny thing about the hadith Qudsi is that they're not, most of them, when you read them, they're not the type of hadiths from which you will take sort of rulings from. Right? You might take some aqidah issues and things like that, but there's not many rulings in it, right? So a lot of the hadiths which are used are about what the Prophet did, didn't do, commanded, about following his sunnah. The hadith Qudsi are not so much like that. And some of them, of course, are just plainly false. They're more like fables, right? I mean, I mentioned one in one of my long video essays, the one about the man who killed 99 people, right? And then he killed an extra one and he was still forgiven. That is all nonsense. That's just it's like it's made specifically for the tyrant who killed all these people, and then they will still go to Jannah. But there is a lot of work being done now to reanalyze the hadith corpus using a lot of technology, using statistics and data analysis and these kind of things, and they're producing some excellent results. Let me see. Okay, Allah goes on. I do believe to know our Creator, we need to go to Jannah. That's true. Yes, Shaitan is the big enemy, and we need to take him as an enemy. Yeah, people are too lazy to read the books they follow. That's what Sam has said here on the stream. There we go. Some people engaged in adultery is an Arab thing. I think maybe I'm not going to be able to catch up with all of these chats. Just go down to the bottom. I think it's mostly people having conversations together anyway. All right, Rashid, how have you been? What do you have for us?
Alhamdulillah. How about you?
Good.
Why? I listened to your last conversation, the one that you made before, where you spoke.
Before this one.
Where you spoke to Mufti Abu Layth.
Yeah.
I wanted to hear more about how that went. I've also wanted to speak to him someday, but I just have not had the opportunity. Usually his streams are like very early in the morning.
He's a proper night owl, man. Proper night owl. When I went to speak to him as well, we was at one of his friends' places where he meets a lot of people, that friend is graciously opens up his house to these kind of meetings. So we were there, me and him, from sort of 9 o'clock, 9:30, all the way till
Wow.
6 o'clock
Mm.
in the
Well,
morning.
that's
So we spoke about many things, and
yeah.
gradually it was just me and him after a couple of hours.
Mm.
Yeah, we talked about. I mean, I mentioned most of the things we talked about, right? I talked a little bit about. We talked about Hamza Yusuf a bit, and Jordan Peterson, and sort of like the legacy of the two. We talked about Surah At-Tawbah, why there's no Bismillah. We talked about the وَضْرِبُوهُنَّ verse, right? And we talked about a bunch of things, and then sort of like I think it was around 3:30 around that time. We were thinking, let's call it a night. So I was giving him a couple of books which I thought he would benefit. I mean, one of them was Hassan al-Maliki's the book um, which he would like to be translated and more well known. Which Mufti doesn't need it, but it's a book about freedom of religion from the Qur'an and the Sunnah. I said to him, yeah, this is the work which he himself would um, put forward the most. He considers to be his most important work, and I know you don't need it. He started laughing. And then the other book was his book on the Hadith, Muawiyah, Fir'aun Hadhi al-Ummah.
Yeah.
It's a history analysis of the Hadith,
Yeah.
which says, Muawiyah is the Fir'aun of this ummah, that every ummah has a Fir'aun and the faith. And of course, people, and he says that about himself. He says oddly that he's the odd one out from sort of a lot of the people who would be considered to be more sort of like enlightened, free-thinking people. He's sort of like the odd one out who still has a positive opinion on Muawiyah, not a very negative one. Everybody else seems to have a very, very negative one of him. And I know that. So I said to him, look, this isn't really to change your mind about him. What I think you would like about this book is just the reassessment of ilm al-jarh wa ta'dil. That in that book, there's a lot of things in the footnotes and throughout where he talks about the influence of of the whole sectarianism on ilm al-jarh wa ta'dil. That there is jarh which is madhhabi, and there's jarh which is ilmi. Right? That there's a criticism of narrators which could be based on real knowledge, and there's criticism which is just based on sectarianism. So like what happened to Bukhari himself, right? So some of the greatest scholars of hadith of his area rejected his narrations and called him da'if for no other reason than his opinion on the createdness or uncreatedness of the Quran, the talaffuz. Because of that, they said he's da'if, which has nothing to do with whether you're narrating something correctly or not, right? So that's
That was typical though in the transmission of hadith. I mean, that was
so
a
say it again.
that was a typical thing when people were taking hadiths from one person to another. It was typical that they would, like for example, it's not you don't see, for example, in the Sunni hadith narrations from the Shia. Like for example, you don't see a lot of hadiths that actually go through those chains from the people of the Shias. You
Well, I
have
mean, you
maybe
do. The thing about it,
from
it's developed. It developed, right? So early on, there wasn't this issue. Early on, in fact, like Amir al-Mu'mineen in Hadith, the earliest one, the one who really revived, the one who basically created Jarh and Ta'dil, Shu'bah. When he was asked, when somebody asked him, the people asked him, tell us, narrate to us, and only narrate to us from the most authentic people. And he said, if I only narrate to you from the most authentic good, then I would only narrate to you from some of these Shia, those who were considered Shia at the time. Of course, now the Sunnis claim them and say they had Tashayyur, but we wouldn't call them Shia now, right? And in many ways, that's true. So it developed. But, I advise people, if they're interested in that, look at the translation video I have of Hassan al-Maliki, where he's doing sort of he's showing his library. right? So there's a lot in there where he's speaking about the development of hadith. He's talking about how things sort of changed from when people first started to criticize or reject narrators due to their sectarian inclinations. Okay, and then it just became more and more hardened. Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani mentions it in Fath al-Bari, right? He says, for example, I used to find it odd that in general the Sunni muhaddithin who were the ones who criticized narrators, that they would تجريحهم الشيعي غالبا وتوثيقهم الناصب مطلقا, right? That they would make jarh, which would be to criticize or problematize the Shia narrators in general. In general, they would problematize them, while they would accept all of the nawasib. So there would be narrators and be called thiqa, right? And without a single tajrih on him. Whereas there are other narrators who just had slight Shia tendencies, for example, will be called, even the great imams like al-Hakim, some would call him Rafidi Khabith, right?
Yeah, I saw
So
that.
even great scholars who just, for example, were narrated the hadiths which were critical of Muawiyah. Or, for example, they wouldn't narrate the fadail of Muawiyah. That's it. They wouldn't narrate the virtues of Muawiyah. They were deemed problematic. So it's a big issue. The best book, if you're interested in reading this whole thing, the very, very best book is Al-Atab al-Jamil ala Ahli al-Jarh wa Ta'dil. Okay, Hassan Malik recommends it a lot as well. It was written by one of the Ba'alawis of Hadramut, the Habaib, one of the early ones, a while ago, right? Umar bin Muhammad bin Aqil al-Alawi. So he wrote this amazing book. So you can look into that if you want. It's a very good book. It's very difficult to find though. Very difficult to buy. Yeah. I mean, you can find the PDFs online and stuff, but in terms of like buying the actual physical book,
I mean, a PDF will be fine. A PDF will be fine. I mostly read on my laptop other books, and I read them. I find the PDFs as because I don't particularly enjoy storing huge piles of books. So most of my books are on the computers with my PDF version on this computer, on my old one. So this like all different books are there. So yeah. But I actually noticed a comment here that I think that you might want to respond to before I get into what I want to talk about.
Say that again, sorry?
I said that there is a comment here that maybe you might want to respond to, pertaining to what you said on Surah Al-Fatiha from Khabab Osman. Hello?
Yes. So the Fatiha, yes. So the Fatiha, there are narrations. Okay, so we have the main narration, which everybody knows about, the first revelation, and because that's in Bukhari, that's what everybody knows, and that's what's famous, right? But there are other narrations which say that no, Fatiha was the first surah to be revealed. There is a revealed before that. So that incident in the cave of Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq, okay, that wasn't the first revelation. That still happened, but even because the Prophet was going to Ghar Hira for a long time, so for 5 years, so from the age around 35, for the next 5 years, he would very often go and spend a night or two or more in the cave praying and meditating. Okay, so he'd either go by himself. Quite a lot of times Ali would go with him. A few times Zayd would go with him. Okay, but he would go there. And if anybody's been to Mecca and actually climbed Hira to the cave, my God, it's such a big climb. Yeah, and it's made easy now because they've carved steps into it. So imagine before when there was no steps to get up there. It's very high up. Very high up. Yeah, very difficult to get to. But it's a very nice sort of enclave sort of like cave, where it's one of those things which is not deep, so it's not dark inside. And it's pretty much, it's like almost like one of the niche where the imam prays in the mosque, but deeper and bigger than that. And it's directly pointing to Mecca. And there's a sort of like almost a flat bit in front of it. And then you can stand there and sort of peek around the side, and you can see Masjid al-Haram down there. So the Prophet used to go there for years, for years before the first revelation and before Iqra bismi rabbika, right? And then so the narrations would say that he received the Fatiha, and he talked in narrations. He talked about two ways in which the Quran was revealed to him, right? So in one, that the angel comes in the form of a person that he can see and recites to him. Jibreel recites to him, okay, and he understands what is physically see the angel in front of him, right? Because in the end, the Quran is revealed on his heart, فإنه نزله على قلبك. من كان عدوا لجبريل فإنه نزله على قلبك. Whoever is an enemy to Jibreel, then it is him who has sent it down on your heart, right? So he would. Another way would be that he'd say it was like a bell, like a vibration, like a strong vibration, okay, which he would hear, and it would only go away once he had grasped the words, okay. So it seems that the very first revelation of the Fatiha came like that, came in that kind of very strong inspiration, like this bell, okay, that it came in that way, and then he had the Fatiha sort of ingrained in his heart, and he used to pray with that. So he used to then recite it a lot, okay. And what is the Fatiha? The Fatiha is this prayer for guidance, okay. It's a prayer for guidance. It's Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim Maliki Yawmiddin Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Okay, those are more in the words of a person praying than they are in the words of Allah Himself, right? So the person speaking in a Fatiha, right, is the Prophet more, right? Bismillah. Of course, it's still revelation from Allah, but it's just like قل أعوذ برب الناس قل أعوذ برب الفلق. Okay. But it's still Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim and Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. So he was praying with that, okay, and praying with God. So he was given the prayer for guidance, and right, was revealed after that, right? So Ihdina as-Sirat al-Mustaqim, right, and after that came Iqra, all right, now read, recite. اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق. Now you're going to recite the Quran, which will guide you, okay, it will teach you, right? And if you read in terms of the order of the Quran as it is now, Surah Al-Baqarah, it goes Alif Lam Mim ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه هدى للمتقين. There will be guidance for the people of taqwa. So in the first dua, which is Ihdina as-Sirat al-Mustaqim, guide us to the straight path, the ones who will be guided by the Quran are the people of taqwa again, right? So the people of taqwa will gain the huda from the Quran, right?
Do you think? Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to ask. Do you think that there's a connection between that and the verse in Surah Al-Hijr, the one وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَاكَ سَبْعًا مِنَ الْمَثَانِي?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَاكَ سَبْعًا مِنَ الْمَثَانِي. That's what was given first. وَالْقُرْآنِ الْعَظِيمِ, and then the Quran came up. And strictly speaking, the Fatiha is not part of the Quran, right? Strictly speaking, by this division, there's a Quran al-Azim, and then there's سبعًا من المثاني, which is al-Fatiha, very clearly, right? So the Fatiha was given first, and then Quran was given
the next.
On top of that, right? Or after
I heard from
and Furqan.
I heard from once.
You heard from him?
I heard of. Do you know Sheikh Akram Nadawi?
Say again, sorry. Sheikh who?
Sheikh Akram Nadawi.
Yes, Nadawi, Sheikh Nadawi. No, wait. I'm thinking of Sheikh Ninawi.
No, not
Akram Nadawi. I've heard the name Nadawi. I'm not sure if it's the same one.
He's a Pakistani muhaddith. I mean, current day muhaddith. He's also very popular on YouTube. He also does his videos in English as well as in Urdu. But anyway, besides the point, I mean, I heard that there was. I heard that he had said. I don't remember exactly why I read it, but that he had said that evidence to suggest that that the Suratul Alaq, that it might not have been the first revelation to have been revealed when because he does hadith studies and all that. So he had suggested that.
Exactly. Yeah, he's probably talking about the same thing, right? It's in our minds, because don't forget that these that's it's just one narration that's in Bukhari, and because it's Bukhari, really, that it's become the dominant, and you find it all the Sirah books and stuff like that. That doesn't mean that's the only thing, right? And it's putting it's narrated by Aisha, who said this is, and this is what she knew, right? That's what she thought was the first revelation. Okay, it's not the prophet saying how I first get the revelation. And it could be that the original narration was, when did you first see Jibreel, for example, right? Because that was the first time he actually saw Jibreel.
Anyway, Sheikh Akram had said that. I think he's actually from India, not Pakistan. Now that I remember, I think he's from India. Wait, he's from the regions, either India or Pakistan. I don't remember exactly, but I found it fascinating the first time when he said it. I think that it was quite interesting. There is also I've heard also, I don't know if you know this guy Sam Gerens, for example. He has his Qur'an translation, and he actually made a connection between he made a connection between the statement ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابِ to suggest that the ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابِ is a reference to Surah Al-Fatiha. So basically, the way he saw it was that you have Surah Al-Fatiha, which was revealed before, and then the Qur'an. This Kitab is referencing that to be, the Kitab, and so he would translate, for example, the word Kitab as a contract or something like that, or something. So basically, Fatiha, basically,
he's of course completely Quran alone, right? So he doesn't look at the history. And so what he says is that the order that he basically sees as the order that's there is the order it was revealed. But of course, Al-Baqarah was revealed in Medina, right? It was the first surah to be revealed in Medina, right? And then the interesting thing about the beginning of that in Medina, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابِ, is the idea, which I think is the correct thing now. Okay, what does Kitab mean in the Quran? It's how we say scripture, right? Scripture. If you look even at the origins of that word, scripture, it's what's prescribed, right? The scripture is something you prescribe. So in the end, Kitab, the idea of Kitab, isn't really about a book.
No, it's not.
Even in if you look now, there's a very interesting amateur sort of like looking up at all of these excellent, these very old carvings on the rock, right? So in the time of Umar, the time of Uthman, people were carving, making inscriptions in the rocks, and I've got a few. There's a list of videos I want to do a translate of those, because they're very, very important. These thousands and hundreds of these engravings in the rocks around Mecca and Medina. And often they would say, "Kataba hadha al-kitab," so and so, right? The one who wrote this kitab. But of course, it's not an actual kitab, is it? It's an inscription on a rock, right? Why is it being called a kitab?
His name? I skipped that part where you said his name.
Al-Mas'ari. His name is Mas'ari. Maybe I'll put it in the description afterwards. But I mean, if you go onto my Twitter, I tweet some of his pictures of different.
I mean, I've heard the same from Ahmad al-Jallad.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
it's similar, but it's the only one I heard that from. I didn't know.
Yeah. He's really done so much work on it. Found so much amazing. So the point is that how the word kitab is being used there,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
So Kitab is not, even a small bit of writing is called actual. Into it in a bit more detail. Kitab is really the prescriptions in the Quran, the laws, the rules, the regulations. These are Kitab. Okay, it's what's prescribed. Kutiba alaykum al-qital wa huwa kurhun lakum. Qital has been written for you, mean prescribed for you, right?
Mm.
كتب عليكم إذا حضر أحدكم الموت. It is prescribed or written for you that when death approaches one of you,
Yeah.
that you write a will. كتب عليكم الصيام كما
Mm.
كتب على الذين من قبلكم. Fasting has been prescribed for you just as it was prescribed for us before. So when we read those verses, we say, the Prophet يعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة, right? Or Isa alayhi salam, ويعلمه الكتاب والحكمة والتوراة والإنجيل. They're separate, right? There's the
Yeah.
Torah, there's the
That,
Injil, there's Hikmah and Kitab. So the Kitab is not the Torah and the Injil, okay, in that sort of way. So what does it mean? It's prescriptions, the laws, the rules. So يعلمهم these sort of things, and Hikmah is how to approach those things with some wisdom, right? Not to
what do
be
you think when
rigid on them.
what do you think when, for example, you have a verse like "Utlu ma uhiya ilayka min al-kitab"? Like, is
Yeah.
that only the prescriptive part of the Quran that is being referenced there, or is it referring to the entire Quran?
Well, it's been more general. It can be taken as more
Mm.
general.
Yeah.
It's part of the multi-layered meanings here. But if you look at the verse which somebody is asking you about, this, this or that or the other, right? And you utlu ali, recite and response to recite what has been revealed of the kitab, the prescriptions which this person is asking about,
Yeah.
right? So it is still talking about reciting about those things. It's also in general, right? So you can still say, I'm not saying that you can't say the whole of the Quran is a kitab, right? You still can say it in that general way, right? That's still fine. But it's just because words can overlap, right? I mean, there's some people think that they can't. Like, for example, in the Quran, it talks about insan and there's bashar, right? And there's ins. These are all still words for the human being, right?
Mm.
I mean, there are some people that say no, they're completely different words, right? So there's overlap. Okay, there's overlap. It's like those Venn diagrams. So these words have some overlap, right? But then there are some things where they're separate, right? And when some things overlap a lot, you can refer to the whole thing by that, right? So if 90% of the Quran is kitab, you can refer to the Quran as kitab, right? Or if a prominent feature that you're relating about it is the kitab part, then that's, when you say kitab, you're meaning that, right? Just like in the Quran, when Allah chooses to say bashar, right, or He chooses to say insan, okay, they're both emphasizing a certain aspect of this creature, but it's the same creature.
Yeah.
Okay, it's the same. So you have in the end the al-ism al-jami', the name which encompasses all that was revealed to the Prophet is al-tanzil. And the Quran it's al-tanzil, that which
Yes.
was sent down, right? So the tanzil is the whole revelation in its entirety. That's what I would say. And then the words, Quran, Furqan, Kitab, these are all being either used sometimes specifically to talk about some portion of it,
You think maybe
or
there are more of a descriptive natures of the
they
Quran?
are emphasizing that portion of it,
Mm.
using the words for the occasion, right?
Yeah.
Using the words for the occasion, like somebody has a nickname, right? And when they sort of like do something which is closer to their nickname, you say to him, you refer to him by that, right?
Yeah, I
No,
think
like
Ali Adani had also said something similar to that being the case there,
yeah,
because
yeah,
he also divides. For example, he doesn't like this. He doesn't have this idea that the Quran sometimes uses it interchangeably in terms of, like, for example, it meaning the same thing. That it is the same scripture, but it's just using a different word for it. So he
yeah,
for example, used like So, okay, when it's using Kitab, it's specifically talking about the prescriptive aspect of the Quran. And when it is talking about the hikmah, it's talking about something else. When it's talking about the
Yeah.
Quran, it's talking about the recited
He,
aspect.
he what does he say? He says, I forget exactly, but we discussed this on Twitter, and more or less we agreed. But his is a much more esoteric take. Anyway, he says that Kitab is the sort of like the divine writ,
Yeah.
something which is sort of like, it's not the actual book, but but at the same time, it's in the Quran will refer in some things to sort of like that, because how it's used, not just how it's used in the Quran. So, for example, when it says, talks about Bani Israel, and it says, قالت اليهود ليست النصارى على شيء وقالت النصارى ليست اليهود على شيء وهم يتلون الكتاب. That's using this al-Kitab. Yet they are both reciting tilawa of the Kitab, the same Kitab. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Jews are saying that they have nothing, but what is the same Kitab that they're both reciting, right? And between them, right? So there's something which is common between them all. Okay, it's this divine revelation that was sort of that's because they confirmed each other, right? The Torah and the Injil, they confirm each other, and it's what's sort of like overlapping in these things, the prescriptions, what they were told to do and not do, these sort of things. Okay, they are both reciting that. Yeah. So how can they both say that the other has nothing? Right, the other is upon nothing. So I mean, it's interesting.
That's an interesting part, because one thing that within Christianity and Judaism, they have this thing where they say, and I think actually that is also carried through the Quran. They have this statement that when you say, for example, within Christianity, you say that's not scripture. Like when you say something like that, it is specific. It means like that is not something that is canon. What it actually means is that it's not canon. It's not.
Yeah, that's a good word. I like that. Canon, right?
Yes,
And
exactly.
it's not that sort of that view is not canon. It's not based on scripture, you could say.
Exactly.
So that's a good way of talking about it as well.
Yeah. So
another way is maybe you could say that view is not legal.
Yeah.
Right. It's not legal. It's not. It's not illegal. We're not. We're not reciting the same. Because again, that gives it more of a prescriptive vibe. What is illegal and illegal, and
exactly.
etc.
So when the Quran, for example, uses this and says that they write يكتبون الكتاب بأيديهم ثم يقولون من عند الله.
So exactly. So they write laws or prescriptions or these things from their own hands, and they say this is from Allah.
Yeah.
Because people think that actually literally, maybe they did talking about and then saying these laws are from Allah as well, right?
Yeah.
So like fatwas, giving fatwas and saying these fatwas are Allah's fatwa.
Exactly.
Okay, and as also the verse where it talks about فَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِبَعْضِ الْكِتَابِ وَتَكْفُرُونَ بِبَعْض, right? Which and if you look at the verse, it's talking about how they were told not to expel each other from their homes, but then they expelled but then they did that, right? But then when these people who they expelled, when they come back when they are brought to them as captives by other people, they will ransom them, right? So they're accepting part of the law, the regulation that they should ransom their fellow Israelites. Yet they don't follow or believe the other part of the Kitab, their prescriptions, their laws, that they shouldn't expel each other from their homes. So again, it's talking. So it's when you look at it, it is a very strong idea that we're talking about these sort of things again. So and looking at the rocking inscriptions and these kind of things, Kitab al-Kitab, this person wrote this Kitab. It's one sentence and it's called the Kitab. It's a piece of writing, right? A piece of inscription. So it doesn't have to mean actual book, right?
Exactly.
But also the interesting thing is how these. I mean, one thing I actually discussed with a friend of mine while I was in the UK is how the Quran. I highly recommend everybody to read Izitsu's ethical religious terms in the Quran. Very valuable book. But one of the things he mentions there, which is very true, is how the Quran is actually, because it's actually laying claim to certain terms. So there are certain terms which, yes, they were there, the Arabs used them, but it laid claim to them and reinvented them a little bit. Which is why it's wrong in many ways that you'll have like the Quran mention a term often and use it in its own way, right? Sort of like just like a writer will start by defining his terms, right? He's saying, okay, yes, this word might mean this, but I'm using it like this, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So what happens? A lot of the Mufassirin, what they will do is they will look to what the pre-Islamic Arabs use this word for, and then they will say, so in the Quran is using this word like this pre-Islamic Arab did, but that he might not be using it as in the way that Allah has reclaimed it.
Yeah,
there are certain words, things that were negative to the pre-Islamic Arabs, which God took command of and made it positive, right? There are certain things that were positive, and the Quran made them negative. Okay, so it's not, and then there's a whole catch-22 of the issue of how the Quran is the earliest thing that we have, and yet if we use later dictionaries, okay, which all the dictionaries are in the end later, right? They're trying to base it, they're trying to go back to what the pre-Islamic Arabs said, but these are going to be narrations. They all recorded afterwards. The earliest writing in Arabic, sort of like the first book in Arabic is the Quran.
Yeah, that's. I mean, when I go and talk to
So
people,
we don't
sorry,
have anything before it,
yeah.
right?
You cut out right there at the last point there. Could you repeat the last point? I didn't catch that because it cut out.
Yes, and yeah, sorry, I'm using the old laptop because the laptop that I use for the work laptop is not functional right now. Yes. So what did you catch, and what do you want me to repeat?
No, I mean that last part, because you cut off once you started going. Just cut off completely.
Yeah, but from where?
When you were mentioning about the when you had said catch-22, and then you went into
Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, the catch-22 is that the dictionaries come after the Quran, and often sometimes they are influenced by the wrong understanding of the Quran. You see what I mean? So some of the dictionaries later they will try to define words using the Quran, but already between the writers of the dictionary and the Quran's revelation, a lot has happened, and some of those words have mutated a bit already.
That's true.
There's one thing where, for example, like the issue of the satanic verses. I wrote about that on Twitter, a thread talking about it. And I think I talked about, we did do a stream about that here as well. But there's the verse which is used sort of as justification of the story sometimes is in Surah Al-Hajj, where it says, وما أرسلنا من رسول أو نبي إلا إذا تمنى ألقى الشيطان في أمنيته. We have not sent a messenger or prophet except that when he tamanna, the shaitan throws into his في أمنيته, in what he tamanna, right? And so you might even find some dictionaries that will say another meaning for tamanna is recite. And why would they say that? They say that because of the narrations about that, right? But in fact, tamanna has never meant recite.
No,
It's sort of like it's been added onto it. So that's one of the issues, that the dictionaries themselves are far after the Quran, right? And even the pre-Islamic poetry in the end is transmitted, okay, and recorded after the Quran as well, right? So but I mean, again, I advise reading the ethical religious concepts in the Quran, because he makes a very good case that the key terms in the Quran, then you can, in the Quran self-defines them. They can be understood just from the Quran, and it's not right to to sometimes take what the pre-Islamic Arabs, how they used it, and say that the Quran used it in the same way. Like, the traditional idea is that the Quran was revealed in the language of the pre-Islamic Arabs.
Mm.
And that's how they say it. So then they try to understand the language of the pre-Islamic Arabs, and through that you understand the language of the Quran. And not taking into account that the Quran can also shift the meanings, right?
Yeah.
It can lay claim to words and use them as and tweak their meaning.
Exactly.
So even the word kafir, it was never used. I'm
Yeah.
still looking myself, looking
I
for
also
the
have
use.
not found anything.
Yeah, I'm still looking for the use of the word kafir in pre-Islamic
Mm.
Arab poetry, or to mean like somebody who left the religion, or kafina in the Quran. It actually means
Yeah.
apostates, because that's one of the ways it was used. Okay, in the Prophet's time himself, he used to be called the apostate, right? And those who accepted Islam were called apostates, using that word sabah, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So so it's just the idea that the Quran is laying claim it does that itself explicitly. Al-Qari'ah, wa mal-Qari'ah, wa ma adraka mal-Qari'ah. It's saying, introducing a term. Sometimes it's creating new words.
Yeah,
There are words in
exactly.
the Quran which are it's just creating them, and then it's saying, okay, do you know what this is? I'll tell you what this is, and then saying what it is, right?
Mm.
So it's interesting, and some of the words, of course, also have like origins which are not Arabic, right? Some
Yeah,
do
yeah,
have,
that's true.
right, non-Arabic
Mm.
origins.
There are some words that, for example, yeah, in that point about the Quran redefining words. For example, when you talk about iman, and that is a special one. When you talk about iman, and usually we think that it means belief, uh,
Mm.
but the way it is used in the Quran. And usually, when I have conversations with these people who have left Islam, and then I tell them that, look, we have the Quran as the earliest source that can attest to the Prophet Muhammad, what he did, what he believed, and how life was back then. It is the earliest source that we have. So we cannot put it aside in favor of other later sources. We have to first look at it being the earliest, and then we have to judge everything, in accordance to it. So whenever I discuss with them, I tell them that is the historical method. That is the method that is considered the most genuine when you look at history. That you look at the earliest source, the one that actually attests, to the time, to the events that were taking place, and then you look at the subsequent sources, and those
Yeah,
sources are not in agreement with the primary source. Then, of course, you question the secondary sources. But the way
yeah,
they do it the other way around. They look at the secondary sources, and then they use those to justify what the Quran is actually talking about. So I'm like,
yeah.
no, actually, it's supposed to be the other way around.
Other way around, yeah.
So,
Mm. Yeah,
and
and
like,
true. What Khabab is saying here, that Ibn Ishaq's, Sirah. Ibn Ishaq's Sirah really defined the way. More so Ibn Hisham, maybe, because Ibn Ishaq was abridged by Ibn Hisham. So
mm,
Ibn, you know how for anybody, the very first Sirah that was written was actually written by Uthman's son,
yeah,
the Caliph Uthman, his son. He wrote the Sirah, and he showed it to Sulaiman ibn Abd al-Malik, and he rejected it. He said, no, we can't accept this. And the reason why is because it gave a lot of praise for the Ansar. I gave a
yeah,
lot of praise for the Ansar, so that was rejected. Then Ibn Ishaq writes he's commissioned basically, right, by the Umayyads to write the Sirah of the Prophet, right?
mm,
And he does that, but he relies on sort of like the narrations from the Umayyad period, right? So his Sirah ends up being more sort of Umayyad focused,
exactly,
Umayyad, right? But later on, Ibn Hisham, again, he takes and he abridges it. So he rewrites. We don't have his Sirah. We have it only through Ibn Hisham. It's lost, right? So Ibn
yeah,
Ishaq, actually, it's only what we have of Ibn Ishaq comes through others. We don't have his actual work. So when Ibn Hisham writes it, he's basically re-abridging it to make it more applicable for the Abbasid time,
mm,
right? So you have this movement, right? So it's very interesting how these things. Now Ibn Hisham's Sirah then it just becomes sort of, because the Muslims don't innovate very well, right? So it becomes the blueprint for a lot of the seerah that we read, which is why then for all of these things, these circumstances, it being originally sort of a Umayyad, um, um, written for the Umayyad times, and then that being taken and abridged to be more appropriate for the Abbasid times, the final sort of like steps of the seerah, which then everybody else follows, has it's not innovated. It's only innovated, surprisingly, in ways which become popular. So to give an example, the Prophet's return from Tabuk, right?
Yeah.
There was the assassination attempt on his
Mm.
life.
Mm.
Okay, and the seerah, the great emphasis that's in one of the hypocrites who is from Khazraj. So Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Abi Salul was
Absolutely.
Khazraj, whereas the one who did the most action, right, was actually from Aus, and it was Abu Amr al-Fasiq, right, the father of Hanzala, the Qasid al-Malaika. Um, Yet, because he was an ally, Aus were generally allies of Quraysh, and this man in particular was ally of Abu Sufyan, right? And he's the one who he fought at Uhud, at Al Khandaq. He got people to fight in Al Khandaq. He's the one who set up Masjid al Dirar. He was involved in the assassination attempt on the Prophet. In the end, he's out there with Hirqal. A very interesting thing for people to understand about that. When the Prophet marched with 30,000 people, and all the way up to Tabuk, and um, and Hirqal, a country, have an army in the Battle of Mu'tah when the Prophet sent Zayd ibn Haritha, right?
Yeah.
What happened? 100,000. It's probably an exaggeration, but they say 100,000 soldiers were sent, right?
Mm.
So why didn't Hirqal send anybody when the Prophet marched himself with 30,000 people north? Because he was already involved in this scheme to have the Prophet assassinated. So he was
Exactly.
aware of this. This was Abu Sufyan when he visited um, Hirqal, right? And we have that narration in Bukhari,
Yeah.
which is from him
Yeah.
saying about how he said this and he asked me this. That's all just a cover up.
Mm.
It's all a cover up. What happened there was he was meeting with him, right? There was more than that. It wasn't just I knew the Prophet would win in the end. That's why he says Hirqal at the end, right?
Yeah.
No, there was something happened, right? And that's why there's no movement, right? The Prophet marches all the way up, right? The Arabs who are there, sort of like the Christian Arabs, scatter. Byzantine does nothing, and then the Prophet goes back.
Mm.
Okay, and of course, on the way back, this assassination attempt happens. The Prophet, main culprits involved, of course, Abu Sufyan and his sons, Yazid and Muawiyah. Abu Musa al-Ashari is also one of them. Suhail ibn Amr, a few others. Okay, and but my point is that when you read a seerah, even Martin Nings, you read many of the seerahs, you don't find them mention the assassination attempt on the Prophet's life on the way back. Why?
Mm.
Why is it not mentioned? Okay, a very important event, right? Which comes up again as being one of the things which Hudhayfa, he knows the names of the hypocrites. People think he knows the names of all hypocrites. No, he knew the names of those who tried to assassinate, because Hudhayfa was there. Hudhayfa and Ammar were with the Prophet when they tried to, these horsemen came and tried to have him thrown off the Aqaba. Okay, so you don't find that in the Sirah, because Ibn Hisham, and they already set the beats of the thing, right?
Mm.
And because these things were there were certain people implicated in that, it's skipped out. Another assassination attempt happened, which is very not known at all, is on the way back from the same people involved, on the way back from Ghadir Khum. So after Hajj, the Prophet, is in Ghadir Khum, and
Mm.
after that, there's another assassination attempt on him.
Mm.
It's called it was at Harsha, and that one is hardly known at all.
Yeah, that one I don't hear so much about. Actually, the one from Ghadir
Yeah,
Khum, I don't
yeah,
hear
there were
much
there were
about.
two Aqabas, basically, assassination attempts.
Mm.
So that one, of course, that doesn't end up being in most series as well,
Mm.
right? So there you have a lot of these things. these things where things are kept beginning when Uthman ibn Affan was Umayyad, right? His son Amr ibn Uthman ibn Affan, he writes a seerah and it's rejected because of the praise for Ansar in it.
Yeah, I mean it's
Right.
you can clearly see there is sometimes you can notice these political alliances that are happening within the Surah. When you read through it, you can clearly see that there's an agenda that is taking place. There's a bias there, the way it is written. That is clear from the Surah books, as far as I'm concerned when I read through it,
Yeah.
and you can clearly see that there's a point that they are trying to lead somewhere. Some things are kept, under, they're kept under key. They cannot
That's strange.
be there.
Yet I think they added to it very easily, right? So the sort of the justification or the Talfif of Ibn Taymiyyah. Ibn Taymiyyah, who was writing 7 centuries later, he's the first one to come up that the reason why the Prophet said what he said at Ghadir Khum was because of the people of Yemen were still criticizing Ali. That ends up being in a lot of Sirah books. Right? A lot of Sirah then take that up later on take that up, the arguments up, and then they talk about when they come to the incident, they mention that there was still some muttering and people some happy with Ali, so the Prophet stopped at Ghadir Khum and said what he said. So given that, so for 7 centuries before that, nobody said that, right? Ibn Taymiyyah says it now. If you read Martin Lings, when it comes to the chapter of Ghadir Khum, that's what he says. He runs with the idea, right, that the Prophet made that speech just because of. But of course, it's nonsense because of course the people of Yemen had already gone south, right? It was the whole incident was sorted out in Mecca, and even if it hadn't been sorted out, the Prophet marched north to Medina. The people of Yemen were not there. They left. They went back to their homes, right? Anyway. This person saying that Ustad Javed Ahmed Ghamidi also says that
he has the same position of Surah Al-Fatiha being the first one. Yeah, Javid Al-Ghamid, yeah. I think I've also heard that, yeah.
was the first. Yeah, I tried to change that. So Ibrahim here is saying, if I take it off first and then go to the next one, that'll be easier. There we go. Allah taught the Prophet ﷺ, and it is He who wrote the full Quran and taught it and taught it to the illiterate Arabs. Yeah, so there's an opinion which, of course, the Prophet was able to read and write. I personally don't ascribe to that. The Prophet had scribes to write for him, and those people wrote, but it was definitely the whole Quran was written in the Prophet's lifetime. And there were 2 copies when he died. 2 full copies. One was kept with Ali. The other copy was kept with Ubay ibn Ka'b, the best reciter from the Ansar. So he kept one with the Ansar and one with the Ahl al-Bayt. The one which was with the Ansar of Ka'b, that was discovered in Syria around the time just before that time of the war, but now it's sort of been lost. I don't know what happened to it. But Suhail Zakar, famous historian, if you go on Ziryab's channel, you'll see some videos with him in it, and he was able to examine it. So he says on each page is the seal of the Prophet on every page, but we'll see. Maybe it will turn up eventually. But yes, so they were both. Now the Sunni narrations, they have these narrations that Ali said that one of the reasons why he didn't give bay'ah to Abu Bakr in the beginning was because he spent 3 days writing. He made an oath that he would write the whole Quran before leaving, and he would not leave his home except for Salah. Okay, except for Salah. Until he had written the whole Quran. Well, if he only went for Salah, then Abu Bakr is there for Salah in the mosque leading the Salah. He could give bay'ah there, right?
Yeah.
So it's silly. No, the point is that they're trying to. It's a cover.
Exactly. Yeah.
Say that Ali wrote that the Mus'haf that Ali had was something he wrote himself, right? And he probably did write most of it himself, but it's the Mus'haf which was written in the time of the Prophet, the Prophet's own Mus'haf, basically. Right, the Prophet's copy. but of course it was rejected. By the new caliphate just because of the political. You see, what do you think about the portrayal of Ali as a young child at the time of revelation, and Abu Talib as a kafir? Yeah, I mean, so Ibn Taymiyyah, for example, he says that Ali became Muslim as a child, and the word of a child, the Islam of a child, is not accepted, right? No, he was old enough to become a Muslim. The Prophet accepted his Islam, right? But yeah, it's that same thing.
Yeah, it's
The people of the house, Ali and Zayd, Khadija, these were the first people to become Muslim.
yeah.
Abu Bakr, he was probably around the 50th person. He wasn't the first among the first of the adult males. He was
But
probably
why do you think that Abu Bakr gained this reputation, though?
You have to remember, he and Umar were one among the few adults who accepted Islam, right? I mean, Abu Bakr, from the early Muslims, right?
Mm.
He was one of the few adults. Everybody else were so much younger than the Prophet. Abu
Yeah.
Bakr was close to his age, right?
Mhm.
So everybody else who were young, very young people, slaves, free slaves, the poor, right?
Mm.
Abu Bakr and Umar were among the elders, right? They were
Okay, so
among the elders of and just by virtue of that,
mm.
um, and there weren't that many at the end of the Meccan period. How many people had become Muslim? Around 70 or something.
Okay, 70 around there.
There's not many, right?
Mm.
And most of them very young people. So of course, just by virtue of age, right? And some people
Mm.
say, okay, and the prophets, married the daughter of Abu Bakr and Umar. Who else was there? Who else was old enough and had children? You know, um, who else was old enough had children who are then daughters who are old enough to be married, right? So I mean, these sort of things need to be understood in better
Yeah.
context. But yeah, I mean, and especially Abu Talib in terms of um, tahqiq, he died as a Muslim. Believers who used to hide his faith in order to protect the Prophet, in order to be able to protect the Prophet. Um,
Yeah.
Al-Fatiha was the first surah. There are many man-made stories, I think, yes.
Yeah.
Um, I just want to go through some of these. If you notice anything,
No.
brother, what is Shaykh's view regarding
The
Kitab
Kitab.
al-Kafi? Yeah, he sees it as pretty much as similar to. He doesn't go deeply into because he doesn't know the jarh and ta'dil of the Shia, and one says, well, look, what we have in the Sunni corpus is enough to find the truth, right? And he doesn't know enough about the jarh and ta'dil to think, but he does have a series reading through it. He does have a series. I haven't seen it yet. He does have a series reading through Al-Kafi
Mm.
on YouTube on one of the channels.
Mm.
But yeah, he has another one about with Nahj al-Balagha, which is very good.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's read through it again and criticizes things in it just as he does in the other
Mm.
in the Sunni books.
Mhm.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm still here. All right. Thank you, Adriana. Listen, are there any relatively more reliable Sira books in English? Not so much. Ziryab he has some notes about it, but he's trying to maybe try and get it published as a book. But the notes from Sirat al-Nabi al-Akram, where Hassan al-Maliki is going through the Quran and taking out, extracting the Sirah from the Quran,
Mm.
and using that to sort of help filter the dross that's in the Sirah narration.
Mm.
But I haven't kept up with Sirah just because it has in a lot of the spirituality in there, and he has a lot of reverence for the Prophet in it, and there's some just excellent. He's a great writer, so I really like that. The Sealed Nectar is pretty good as well. I remember when I read that, but generally, more in terms of more authentic, reliable Sirah books in English, I don't know many. Yeah, there's Riyab. There you go. Speak of the guy. Um, Best one in English language is the one by Professor Juan Cole. So there's your answer. I haven't read that myself, but Riyab knows it very well. So I take what he says very seriously. Probably not much. If Ali could write, then the Prophet could to some extent. Yeah, I mean, it's a contested issue about the the Quran says
ولا
وما كنت
تخطه بيمينك.
وما كنت تدرس من قبله من كتاب ولا تخطه بيمينك. You never used to study before it a book, nor write it with your hand, with your right hand. And it says إذن لارتاب المبطلون. And otherwise, then the مبطلون would
Would have doubted.
had a reason to doubt, right? So, those who say that the Prophet later learned to write, or that he could write, reason or to write, all of these ideas. So I personally don't think that, but he had. I mean, we know that he had scribes.
Yes.
He had scribes and wrote the Quran for him, right? And they were all set, and they are known. They're not like unknown. And Ali was the one who wrote the most for him.
Speaking on that issue of writing the Quran, I always found that argument, the argument that is popular, that the Quran was written basically on different material and scattered everywhere, and then it was gathered in the time of Abu Bakr. So that standard narrative that we have. I always
look, I mean,
with that.
Yeah, the interesting thing about that. Sorry to cut you off there.
No, that's fine.
I'm excited, but the interesting thing about that is that what would they get? When Zayd was sort of commissioned to do that, right? And what did he? It seems to me he struggled to get what he needed, right? It means that people were not very helpful. They didn't help him with that, right? They were giving him the worst that they had, on bones, on leaves. No, come on. I mean, the Prophet spent money on expeditions, on this and that. He spent money to get and he used to, so it's one of the things which shows how little regard people had for the process that Zayd did. And again, you see that later. It comes up later with Ibn Mas'ud, right? When Uthman tries to, get, they say that he burns all the Quran and stuff. By the way, I don't accept that. I think when I was I used to speak on Twitter with Marin Dan Putin and what's his name, Hitham Siddiqui, and I brought up the issue. Why are we accepting that there was a mass burning, right? Why are we accepting that this actually happened? I think it didn't happen. I don't see it happen. Yes, Uthman commanded it, but did people carry it out? I don't think so. I mean, one of the things that people criticized Uthman for, the people who came and surrounded him, said that you burnt the Quran. So those people definitely didn't burn their Qurans, right? Right?
Yeah.
And then there's Ibn Mas'ud in Kufa telling people to hide their mushafs, right? Because I didn't say people, there's no reckoning, and mushafs are lost very, very quickly. Like right now, by all rights, we should have the Masahif of Uthman. If he sent out 4 or 5 or 6 or 7, we should have one of them at least known for sure. This is his Masahif in a museum somewhere. We don't. Very, very quickly they are lost. What does that mean? Nobody cared.
Yeah, exactly.
Nobody was really looking at it, right? But of course, the great scholars, and they are amazing scholars, Marin Van Putten, Siddiqui, they are analyzing the manuscripts that we have, and they do show that it ends up in a stemma, right? So they pretty much say we've proven that there was an original copy made in Medina, right? And then and then from that, other copies were made,
Yeah.
right? And they can show that in a sort of stemma.
Mm.
And I've put forward a different idea that it could be that this copying could be explained also by, because the way they show the stemma, how it goes,
Yes.
it's also in the same movement of the expansion and the movement of cities. So you have basically four copies, one in Medina, one in Basra, one in Kufa, one in shows is in Medina, right? And then the one in which way around was it? Kufa. The one in Basra was copied from Kufa, right? And then there's some contamination. Well, that sequence is also the sequence of how the Muslims moved. How these cities, Syria was always there, but then these two new cities were built, right, in Umar's time, Kufa and Basra, right? And so the movement, I place this, I tentatively place this stemma as the copying of the movement of this material, the Quranic material that was already there. Because I don't believe it until we can prove that all of it was just suddenly, it was literally all burnt and destroyed. I don't think the idea that every single manuscript is descended from from four copies. And when we have no narrations of people lining up to copy that, we can't. We in terms of history, trying to find out about a single copy, what happened to it, we can't find it. Imam Maliki, when he is asked about the Mus'haf of Uthman, he says Dhahab, it's gone. Just like we don't know where it is. We don't know where it is. When I brought this up to Haytham Siddiqui, he sort of like a bit cheekily, sort of, to be honest, but he said, "Great, that's a great idea for a thread. Well, what happened to?" So he made a thread. So he made a thread where he's trying to copy to find what happened to one of the Mus'hafs of Uthman. And all it did was prove that it was lost quickly. That the last sighting of it was like
Yeah.
long before Imam Malik, and then nobody knows what happened to them. But if
Yeah.
people were copying en masse from these, people were like burning their books and then going out and making a fresh copy. No, nobody was queuing up to do this. We don't see that in narrations. It's very interesting.
Yeah, what I was going to also add on that was, if you look at the Quran itself, I think the Quran itself is a giveaway for this, because when you look at the Quran, even in Surah Al-Baqarah, you'll notice that when it's talking about Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu idha tadayantum bidaynin faktubu, that it talks about a debt that you have. If you're contracting a debt, you write it down. So
Exactly, write it down.
less of less significance than the Quran. How is it that Allah is instructing people to write down if there was no writing, or writing was so scarce? Why is the debt being written down, and the Quran, nobody's writing down like to preserve? I found that strange. Like, this clearly came in a time where there were people who were capable of writing, and also who were familiar with writing. I think otherwise it wouldn't make sense for Allah to write down a debt.
It's a very big. I mean, it's a very, very big topic. I mean, I remember when in Blogging Theology, which is a very good channel, they brought Ali Al-Tai to speak about the preservation of the Quran, and he says, that there's no better way that could have been done than what Uthman did and what the Sahaba did, which is just such nonsensical. There's no better way it could have been done, really. There was the worst way that it could have been done. What happened there? The early Muslims, they completely messed up the whole ability for us to have confidence in the way the Quran was written and transmitted. And then you have all of these, which I don't accept, of course, the different qira'at. Right, the Prophet didn't teach multiple qira'at. Right, he taught the Quran in one way. It was recited one way, and everything else is a divergence.
Exactly.
Okay, and it's the fault of the early Muslims. They expanded Uthman. What did Abu Bakr? What did he? Let's say he made that collection. Then what did they do? They sat on it. They sat on it until this problem came about. They waited for it to come. I mean, it's come on.
Yeah,
And I never said there was no better way that could have been done. No, it was horrendous. There was no worse way that could have been done, and still sort of the job getting done.
but also it's
So there's
strange.
no.
There were so many camels. Like, for example, you read, for example, within the Sira literature, or you read Hadith, right, where someone says, "Oh, this guy sacrificed like 1,000 or 500 camels or 100 camels,"
Yeah,
but they couldn't make
plenty of
parchment.
parchments.
Yeah.
Yeah, plenty of parchment.
That is so strange, to
Yeah,
sacrifice or to kill that many animals and not to think, hey, maybe we should make parchment. I mean,
yeah,
yes, it takes a long time, but we can still make parchment and, write
mm,
down the Quran. That would
yeah.
seem the most
And
like
it
the,
can, yeah, and it could just be acquired or bought.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's so
it's not an
strange.
issue. They wrote the Jahilin, right? The Quraysh
Yeah,
wrote the hanged poems, right? They wrote them and hung them in the
the
Kaaba.
mu'allaqat, yeah,
And the Quran could be written.
they wrote the mu'allaqat. Why is it that they didn't, with the Quran, it was of less significance? It's for me, the whole thing is just the whole narrative. It's strange. I never really
Yeah,
believed that it could.
yeah. And here, of course, again, Habab is mentioning that the prophet, just before the prophet's death, he asked, give me something to write on, um, and basically they were refusing, right? I mean, give me something to write for it, so that you will never go astray after me.
Mm,
So if the prophet is going to write something, he's not going to write something now, right? That you'll never go astray after me, while the
yeah,
Quran is left unwritten. That
exactly.
clearly indicates the whole Quran has already been written, and now
Yeah,
he's writing something else, maybe, right? Another last will. Um,
exactly. Yeah.
so it's not going to say, it's just a whole
No.
lot of things.
Yeah. Anyway,
Then it says all the Quran was revealed by the Prophet in noble tablets.
well,
True.
um,
Anyway, let me go down to the bottom. Is there anything else
yeah,
I
just
want to say? Is Riyab is there? Hold on,
I
let me read Riyab's. Let me
I
read it.
started making uh, a series on the Quran, where I go through the Quran, and I started today with the
Ah,
Surah
you started
Al-Baqarah.
something. You made a channel.
Yeah, I actually always have. I always have
Mm.
had one, but I just don't mention it that frequently when I go to
Mm.
streams. I don't mention that. Oh, it's my channel and this. But yeah,
Uh-huh.
it's also called chilling with scripture. I mean, with this,
Okay.
and
Oh yes. I remember. Yes.
yeah, and it's yeah. But on there, I've started doing the Quran, where I go through the Quran, and I started from Surah Al-Baqarah. Today I did the first 5 verses of Surah Al-Baqarah, and I
Mm.
hope to make it
Mm.
like a
A
weekly thing,
series.
or like that, a series like that. I would very much love
Mm.
it if sometime if you have time, you can come on and we could talk about those different verses if
Yeah, definitely.
possible.
What time do you do it and when?
I mean, for me personally, I think that because I'm still trying to figure out whether it is Sunday or it is Saturday that is the best time. So I
Mm.
need to figure out exactly which times. But I think it would be maybe Saturday. I think
Okay.
that's
Okay.
if that's
I'll
would work.
definitely try to have a look at it. Anyway,
Yeah. Mhm.
definitely. All right. Okay, brilliant. I think we should sort of try to call it quit now. It's been almost 2 hours. I didn't expect that, but alhamdulillah, it's good, right?
Yeah. Anyway, thank you very much for the talk. I mean, it was
No,
very wonderful talk. I really
no
enjoyed
problem. No
it.
problem. Yeah, it's nice having you on as always. Jazakallah khair.
Assalamu alaikum.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum. Take care. Okay, let me just quickly look at this. So Ziryab is telling us Professor Cole has a colorful history. None of it takes away from his scholarship. Read it for yourselves. I don't know what that colorful history is. See how he represents the prophet, what hierarchy he employs, what respect to sources. Okay, yeah, I'll definitely look. That's a nice thing to try to read. Sometimes the sound goes crazy. I can't hear anything. Yes, no, I will be buying a new device soon. I'm just using an old device for today since coming back. I haven't been able to sort things out. Sorry about that. Yeah, so this is from Mariam van Putten, he wrote a book which is open access, so anybody can download and read it, which is the Qur'anic Arabic, where he argues, because there's two opinions, right? There's the opinion which was mostly accepted, which was that the Quran was written in sort of a dialect of sort of like a high Arabic, sort of like the Arabic of the poets. It wasn't written in the dialect of Quraysh. And he makes the argument, no, that it isn't actually in that. It is actually in the dialect of Quraysh, right? I've gone back and forth between those two myself. I'm the right one because, I'm not too sure about it. But I haven't read his work yet. I need to read that and have a look. But I've used the idea that the Quran is in the dialect of Quraysh, or in that dialect, to give the idea that the most accurate qira'ah, recitation, is a recitation of Hafs, because it is the one which is more of a one-to-one recitation, which goes back to Ali. Why Ali? Because Ali, of course, is exactly the same as the Prophet in terms of his dialect. He was raised in the Prophet's house. He's from Bani Hashim, so he was raised by the Prophet, right? So his dialect is the closest to the Prophet's from anybody else of the people who had memorized the Quran and who have chains which go back to him. And then from Ali, there's Abu Abdurrahman al-Sulami, one of the greatest reciters, and he said, even though that there are narrations which say that he learned the Quran from Uthman and Ali and all these other people, he says in one narration that he learned the Quran, the Qira'ah, from Ali, and not a single verse from anybody else. And then after that, he teaches the Quran to Asim, and Asim, he learns two versions. He learns one version from Abu Abdurrahman al-Sulami, and he learns another version from Zir, okay, Ibn Hubaysh. And Zir, he got his recitation from Ibn Mas'ud. Now, Ibn Mas'ud's dialect from that Asim does. So some people say that they because Asim, basically, according to Hafs, he says that Asim taught Hafs the qira'ah that he got from Abu Abdurrahman al-Sulami from Ali ibn Abi Talib, while he taught Shu'bah, who is the other. So there are two qira'at which go back to Asim, right? So there's Hafs and Asim, and then there's Shu'bah and Asim. Okay, so Hafs narrates, and some are rejecting this and say he's lying about this, but I think it bears out in what we see. Hafs says that Asim taught him the recitation he got from Abu Abdurrahman al-Sulami, while he taught Shu'bah the recitation he got from Zir. So he separated them out, right? And we see that in terms of how these two qira'at which go back to Asim, they're very different. They're much more different from each other than is the case with any of the other qurra, right? So if, for example, you have Warsh and Nafi', and you also have Qalun and Nafi'. These are two qira'at that go back through Nafi'. And these two qira'at are very similar, which makes sense. They both come from the same narrator. And the same is true of all the others, except when it comes to Hafs and Shu'bah. They are very different from each other, almost, in fact, more different than qira'at from separate masters. So that gives weight to the idea that what Hafs said is true, that Asim did in fact separate out these recitations. But it's not perfect. I think that there are still some things in Asim where a different recitation is a bit better, has more sort of like وَقَضَى رَبُّكَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ, that verse. When you compare it with different verses, the more accurate reading might be وَوَصَّى رَبُّكَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ. But anyway, that's just something else. But yeah, if you look at it this way, you come up to the idea that the Hafs is the most, I think. And I think also in terms of like, if we accept that the Quran has the divine oversight on it, that Allah is protecting the Quran and on the dhikr, right? There's amount of providence that goes into these things. Hafs has become so dominant, okay, so dominant that it doesn't look like any other qira'ah will ever displace it, right? It is the dominant qira'ah. And does that happen by accident? Could there be the work of I've mentioned this before, could there be the work of angels in prompting things to be in that way? Anyway, that's one idea I have. The channel name from Rashid, I'm not sure. I think it's Chilling with Scriptures. Chilling with Scriptures. I'll look for it and try to put it on the description. One more comment we have here from the trio that Ziriyab mentions as well, as the scriptures found in Hijaz. It goes against the idea of the Arabs being literate. Yeah, exactly. Right. So the Arabs gained literacy. They were illiterate people. Right. But of course, that doesn't mean all of them were illiterate. Right. I mean, in the modern world now, there are places where you don't have a lot of, where the literacy is very low. So there were a lot of people that are literate, and even though there are narrations of the Prophet, he would have encouraged people to learn to read and write. Okay, and the inscriptions that happened, there are some which are pre-Islamic, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done on them. There's a lot of work that needs to be done on them. It takes a lot of work to sort of date an inscription and be completely accurate about it. Yeah, here it is. Here's a channel body. Chilling with scriptures. Definitely look into that. Okay, after joining that were interesting, beneficial in some way. And again, a reminder: anybody can come on, please, and share your thoughts, your contemplations, any insights you have in the Quran. Please do make notes of them, and come on one time and share them with us. Okay, Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.